I runga I te aroha, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. E ngā rau rangatira mā ngā mana, ngā reo, nau mai haere mai ki tētahi kōrero. Ko wai ahau e tuake nei. Who is this person that stands before you this afternoon? Very quietly, much quieter than usual, but Eugene's working on that. Kia ora, number 3, I think this one. He uri ahau, I te taho tōku papa, he uri ahau no Ngāpuhi, no Te Rarawa, no ngā iwi o Tauranga Moana, ngā Tapuika, ngā Ngaiterangi, Ngāti Rangi Nui, Waitaha, me Ngāti Rēhia, fiddly-dee, I te taha o tōku māma. Ko Donna O'Gorman tōna ingoa, ko Hemi Pōmare tōku pāpā. Ko Hannah Seddon tōku ingoa, no reira tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora koutou. So the discussion, the name of the panel discussion for this afternoon is something about contemporary reflections on church, gospel, culture, in te ao Māori. What a gigantic topic. Given that we only have an hour and a half, we're going to narrow that down into some really relevant things that are happening right now. And but I also want to set you a challenge first. After we have introduced each one of the panel members, our kai kōrero today, after that, I'm going to ask you to think about why you chose to come into this room instead of one of the other rooms, because there's some great big juicy kōrero happening in other places right now, but you chose to be in here. I just want to ask you why. And Dale, you can't say it's because you've got cool mates that are in the panel. You can, but that's not, there's another reason. What is it that brings you in here? And we'd be interested to hear that, because it helps us maybe to reflect some of that and responding to that desire that is awakened in you this afternoon. I opened the door to get some fresh air, because don't fall asleep, because we need you to hear what's being said, whether it's by our kai kōrero or by the Holy Spirit or by the person next to you who can't help but exclaim when they hear something like, oh, kōrero, kōrero. Okay, so that's happening over there. If you need to get up and walk around, do press-ups to stay awake. Do what you got to do. If I need to do that, you know there's something weird going on if I start doing press-ups. Anyway, I just want to hand over, and we'll start with Brad, if each person could just introduce themselves, ko wai koe, no hea koe, and also just real briefly, no hea koe in the sense of what brings you into this discussion. Why is this something that you think needs to be talked about today? Kia ora, Brad.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. Ko Bradford Hami ahau. Kei te noho au ki whakatāne, ki roti te rohe o Ngāti Awa, no te whare o Tōroa, o Ngāti Hokopu, te hapu, kai raro I te tau marumarutanga nei o te waka o Mātātua. My name's Bradford Hami. I live in Whakatāne, and I am come from an area under the Ngāti Awa tribal area, and my hapu is Ngāti Hokopu. Even though I live in Whakatāne, I actually work at Laidlaw College as well, up in Auckland, at the Bible College, and have been teaching Treaty of Waitangi, biculturalism, and the place of the gospel inside that history, which we have made compulsory for every student that goes to Laidlaw has to learn this kōrero. It was never compulsory until the last 2 years we start to push it. But it's a theological discussion as well. So I kind of sit in that space, and I'm a bit of a ring-in because I wasn't meant to be on this. I was on the panel beforehand in this room, but a couple of people were unable to attend. So Hannah asked me to come and share today. So I kind of work in the space of Māori and the gospel. I do a lot of travelling around the country, so I suppose I have a bit of an idea of what the different Māori communities around the country are doing and what God is doing in those communities. So maybe that's why I'm meant to be here today. Kia ora, everyone.
Tēnā tātou katoa e te whare. He hono ngā oku ki te nuinga o ngā pito tēnei o ngā motu. I te taha o tōku, tētahi oku kuia he Ngāti Hine, no tata mai nei i Pipiwai. Ngō Ngāti Haka anō hoki, taku hapu o Ngai Tūhoi, te taha o taku kraua. I reira anō he whakapapa oku no Waitaha Tapuika ki te aroa. Ko Waiora Te Moni tōku ingoa. He aha hau I whai wāhi ki tēnei o ngā... Oh, sorry. What am I doing here? Not to say sorry. Never apologise for the language. Praise the Lord. I found myself here mostly because I was asked by a good friend. There's only a few people in my life that I don't say no to, and she's one of them. So, yeah, I was asked. And in terms of contribution, I'm not working in the Māori gospel space at all, but I think that it has been my life. So my parents were saved Baptist in the 70s, 80s, and then went to a school of ministry with Uncle Luke in Pukekohe, Te Whare Amorangi, one of the first of its kind. I have nothing but respect for anyone who has been on the kaupapa of this idea of kind of culture, Māoritanga and karaitianatanga and how they sit well together, especially in those years, because it's beginning to become recognised and people want to understand it and people care for us, which is wonderful. But they haven't always. So, yeah, I was just saying to someone that anyone over 50 who is Māori and who chooses Jesus, I just am like, well done to you. Because I look at them and I know from seeing the experience of my parents that undoubtedly there was a cost. And so I don't know what it is, and I might never, but I'm grateful that they're here still. So, yeah, I will contribute what I can, as I can. Ai, koia.
Tēnā rā koutou, ko Eugene Fuimaono tōku ingoa, hiuri e hau no Ngāti Rēhia, kei tuara o te moana nei, wai hoki no kōnei, ko taku tipuna, ko kai te kimara, ko tōna, hei kau e pena, ko tōna tritiki kora. Yeah, nā reira he pai te noho ahau ki kōnei, ki mo ia koutou i tēnei wā. Kia ora, my name's Eugene. I'm Jacobus, which is Dutch, for Dutchies. Kia ora. Fuimaono, shout out to the Dutch. And yeah, I hail from just across the bay, from Te Tī, which is over in Bab Islands, and then also from here, and my ancestor that connects me here. His polite name, as we know it, is Kai Te Kimara. I won't tell you the other one. You can research it yourself. And yeah, it's just good to be here in front of you all on this whenua with the whakapapa that connects me to this conversation. And if you know even a tiny bit about Ngāpuhi, we've been Christian since ages ago, and we've done all of your different modes of it. We're still trying to find the correct one. So it's good to be here to contribute to this kororo. And my sort of theological I guess, is that I'm in the midst of completing a PhD that is specifically aimed at analysing Māori theology and specifically the idea of atua Māori and re-examining them from a Māori epistemology or ways of knowing so that we can have a re-analysis of them that is a little bit more correct and less biased. Kia ora. I also work at Carey. Shout out to Andrew. Mai te ora.
Tēnā koutou, ko Jordyn Rapana tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no Whāingaroa, a lot of people know it as Raglan. He uri hoki tēnei no Mulifanua Lalovi no Vaimoso no Falelatai hoki. So my mother is Samoan, my father is Māori, and apparently Irish and Scottish, as we found out 20 minutes ago. Doits! And I relate to this kōrero, I think, through whakapapa. I grew up in the Baptist church with minister parents, pastor's kid, and a lot to do with Māori ministry, and studied through Carey, worked with Carey for a while, and was that this year? Left earlier this year, but still will have forever hononga connections to the Baptist space because that's been my my growing space. So hopefully we'll find some great contributions for this kōrero.
Ai, kia ora. Just to add to what I said before, my I guess reason for coming into kōrero like this, or being someone who's trying to learn and understand and discuss and challenge, is because about 20 years ago I decided to become a social worker, and that's the path that God took me down. And I came to work for the Salvation Army, who I'm still with today. And along the way, I began to see things in my mahi, in our mahi, where, you know, so many people that were coming in from the local prison were Māori, and I was only just coming to grips with this reality that things were wildly unfair, and I began this journey of trying to understand why. And when I asked the Lord, you know, what do you want me to do? I don't know much. I don't have much. I actually grew up with my mother, who's Pākehā, Irish version of that, so that's a whole thing. But I didn't actually grow up with my inheritance, what is actually mine. I didn't grow up with Waiata, I didn't grow up with Te Reo Māori. So sometimes you can feel like, oh, what do I have to offer into the conversation? And then it's really about going along and doing the things you need to do to be able to contribute, and not just sitting back with excuses. And so there are no excuses. It still hurts from time to time, but I've also seen just some powerful, beautiful, wonderful things happen when you just follow that. And so, I'm currently leading the church and social services in Salvation Army Rotorua, and a student at Otago, and I know, kind of. And anyway, and I want to open this kōrero just by asking you, can you have a chat with the person next to you? Yeah, I'm that kind of person. I'm a facilitator by trade, worked in addictions in the prison, so I'm going to get you to do some talking. That's not lazy, that's resourceful. So have a kōrero with the person next to you, and like I said, not because I know that person, but actually, why did you come into this room? What do you think is going to happen in here that made you come here instead of going to have a nap? Okay? I guess the first question, if I start up this end here, but at any time, guys, just jump in. There's been a lot of history, a lot of talking about how things were. There's been a lot of, bringing forward intentions, all of that sort of thing. But we really need to deal with the fact that today, there is a generation that is coming along that are challenging all sorts of things around identity, our colonial past, all of those sorts of things. And I wonder, Jordyn, if you could kick us off with the sense, particularly for a younger generation, of where things are at, what the questions are that are being asked by younger Māori and others, but particularly by Māori, around their relationship with the church or their relationship with their culture.
I just want to say that I'm 31. Like, I know that might be young to other people, but it's kind of sad if I'm like the young person now, just to say.
Sad for me too, by the way, but anyway, yeah.
And I say that because, I'm mostly just speaking from my own experience growing up, and I can only speak from growing up within the Baptist churches. It feels like there's been a big undoing, I think we have a lot more access to information, a lot more. I think we get to see a particular generation. This is not one of me, but a lot of my friends have grown up in kohanga reo, and so they have really strong identities. And in comparison, I did not have that growing up in my church. I didn't look around and see me represented in many places, except for in my own household, which was beautiful. And I would say that I was very privileged to have parents who were in leadership, and so created access ways for me to, I think, engage within the church. But I'm not sure that my peers had that same privilege or that same access. So I think I've seen a lot of the undoing of the way we've done church, a lot of unlearning certain things that we just thought were truths. I don't think my generation settles for having to defend our identity as Māori. Like, that's not really some of the questions that we're asking around, can I be Māori and Christian? It's well, I am a Māori and I am Christian, and we're allowing the strength of our identity to, for that to be our starting point in discovering or rediscovering faith and engaging in Christian faith and ways of living, faith expressions. I've probably seen that worked out within music a lot, like within the churches, Waiata Reo Māori, and just seeing the development of Reo Māori worship songs and the writing of those songs, and then the singing of those songs, the collective singing of those songs, the collective pushback against those songs. We don't understand this word. We won't sing this word. So I have gotten to grow with all of the joys and all of the pains of being a Māori in church. And I think now it's both promising, because I think when one version of something ends, it's often a sign of something else that can emerge. But it's also really sad that I would be the young person, 31, 2 children, married. I'm not a teenager. So they would be, that's a very different generation as well, the way that the Gen Z is scary. But they are so much more forward thinking and have different questions than even I'm asking. So that would be another interesting conversation.
Eugene, I guess a question for you, just bouncing off that one, is actually about music. As a musician, and also with Hope, you guys, Jordyn, everybody, beautiful musicians, beautiful singers, worshippers, all of that. Sometimes people, I was part of a review recently where people were trying to, I guess, share something about what they're doing practically in their contexts to make change. And a lot of what they were talking about was waiata. We've learned waiata and karakia. Tick. We've done that. And so, but I'm hearing it's important that waiata and karakia and language are all important. You know what I'm asking, right? Like, is that enough to learn how to sing Te Aroha and then we've met our obligations? Or what is it about music? Where is it that you want... Where are we supposed to be heading? Where are people asking us to be heading, whether they're old or young?
I'm probably not the correct person to answer the one about music specifically. But the idea of having... I'm a musician, but I don't I just play guitar. Jordyn's the person. But like the idea of... I think in church, right? Or just any circles, outside of the church circles, like we've been to a few pōwhiri that are like in art centres or jazz festivals and stuff like that. And that the idea, typically in most, and I use the word white, but I use it in Willie Jennings' sense that it's like a cultural condition, not a racial one. And it's a cultural condition tied up with the idea of the imperialness of blah, blah, blah. And if you want to challenge me on it, hit me up later. It's not super offensive, but it might be. But like white organisations feel that once they've learned a song and learned how to do a mihi and might be able to run a pōwhiri, that they've kind of made it. Hey man, we've made it. We are Aotearoa, or we are New Zealanders, we are one. And like, that's... The way that I view it is that it always has to be a journey. It can never be like a goal. Hey, we've hit these goals. We've got a song. We've got a mihi, and we know how to do a hongi. We've made it, and now we're bicultural, whatever word you want to throw out. It always has to be, okay, we've done this leg of the journey. What's the next leg? And I see a lot of organisations getting stuck on the first leg and going, we've landed. I have lots of funny examples. But it's just to say that, yeah, do a journey. I'm just thinking, is it funny in like, is it like a everyone funny? Or is it a like...
Should we find out?
You had to be there.
Hands up if
funny.
you'd like to find out. Oh, there we go.
I'm definitely like the guy that shares that you had to be there ones. No, I'm not going to do it. If you want to know, ask later.
Okay. Yeah. I've got an idea. Awesome.
You go. That would be me. That would be my view on that. And regarding waiata, like I'm definitely the person to ask, but I like the idea of our friend Mohi, and so does Jordyn. They write bilingual songs, and it makes accessibility, I guess, is a huge one for all audiences with the reo ingarangi and reo Māori. But also it just creates like a sense of engagement, I guess, that anyone can listen to it and get something from it, but then you also get to participate in someone else's sort of pool. So, yeah, for the idea of music, I think that is the absolute benefit of music today, is that there are artists doing that, and that it's becoming more popularised, and that it can only ever lead to more reo Māori being listened to and then eventually spoken. Kia ora.
I've got like one idea, and then I'll do like an exposition of a thought. So the first idea is just actually an experience that I had in responding kind of to you saying people want things to tick off. I've done that, excellent, wonderful, wonderful partnership by me. I had a friend once ask me, she had just kind of been introduced to the experience of Māori in New Zealand and learning that they may not have been so good, and was feeling the weight of that burden and that learning. And she came to me and she asked me, in humility, her posture was definitely one of humility, and earnestly, what can I do? What should I do? And I think she wanted me to prescribe things to read, things to watch, things to wear, things to say, things not to say. But what I actually ended up saying, and you've heard this, was not today, because I'm here and I'm good, but one day you'll be faced with a choice or the ability to make a choice. Sorry, eat the mic. You'll be faced with the ability to make a choice that unfortunately is one or the other, and it will benefit Māori, but it might be to your own detriment. And in that moment, I want you to choose me. And in that moment, I want you to feel the cost. And in that moment, I want you to remember this question and the heart that you asked this question with. Like, when the rubber hits the road, are you willing for it to cost you to benefit me? Was what I said to her. And I've seen her be totally, yeah, she's done the mahi, she is doing it. It is, as you say, a journey. And then coming back to your pātai hana about the questions that are being asked by young people today, potentially in Māori people, Māori communities and Christian communities and faith communities, and as they try to unpack really complex things, man, their identity and their faith and their past and their future and all of eat the mic, all of the things that are wrapped up in that. I think yesterday afternoon at the Pōhiri, one of the final waiata tautoko was Hutia Te Rito, and it ends with whakatauki that a lot of people often will share whakatauaki. Hea te mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. And then that reflected also in the kōrero of Justice Joe yesterday evening when he spoke about talking across the void being the understanding of the other, and that the perspective of Māori when they came to the treaty could not be reduced to a two-dimensional experience. Everything is deeply embodied. It is deeply rooted in whanaungatanga, in the ability to see, know, and understand the other. And then continuing on from that, I'll get to a point. Just come with me, the journey. And following on from that idea of whanaungatanga, he talked about, what he perceived was happening there was that the rangatira Māori were seeing themselves in the signing or putting their mark on the paper, sharing a taumata of power with the person that they were whanaunga with, the person that they were in a relationship with. By the strength of their relationship, they were meeting them in power. And then my sister and I, in kind of processing, heading home yesterday evening, we're talking about something that she's recently learned about the equity of power and the fact that people will look at it and think, how much power is there to be had? How many people are there to have it divided equally, right? But it isn't quantitative. What equity of power looks like is understanding you also have to look at mutual flourishing. Do we have a shared concept of what that is? And once you have that, go back to the group, look at the skills that they have, and then distribute power not equally among the people, but equally among the skill sets and the people who are best equipped to bring that mutual flourishing to bear, right? So my understanding in all of that, and answering the question, is that we need to ask what young people, not prescribe to them, ask what young Māori Christians believe it looks like to be tūturu Māori and karaitiana. And how are they holding those things? What does it look like for them to hold those things? How is power displaced? How do we redistribute it in order to not feed their understandings, but to meet them in power in that journey? It's a journey of whanaungatanga. It's a journey of redistribution of power. It's a journey of understanding, having a shared understanding of what mutual flourishing looks like. And it is, and I think, yeah, it starts with like understanding. There we go.
So can I ask, just before we go to Brad, can I ask you, Waiora, to get from that point of having understanding and then to move into actually doing something practical? I'm going to ask you for an example. If you can think of an example, or 10, it's fine, of ways that you can actually do the thing that you've just described, or ways where you've seen that happen and it's actually been really powerful. Because this morning Ngāti Kawa got up and he said, you know, this is real cool, kōrero, wonderful academic research, da-da-da-da-da, and also what difference is it going to make for our people? Like, what's the impact it's going to have, and how are you going to be part of actually making that happen? And I think that's, for many of us, we want to just, what do we do? So any examples there, Waiora?
Yeah, I've got an example and an idea. I do think that, like George was saying, we're kind of in a time of transition, and so it can look bare, but the seeds are there. Seeds are sown, seeds exist. They've been sown by the generations before us. So I think don't be off-put by looking at what looks bare, firstly. Secondly, I do think that we're in a season of new information. So I think the work at the moment is, because, you know, if we also think about Ahorangi Stanley's kōrero today about civilization, race and culture, you see there that ideas build the experience. Ideas, what begins as a belief then becomes an embodied thing that becomes the experience of the culture or of the person, right? So things don't just happen. Someone thought of it, someone made other people come along with the thought, and then now it's just the thing that everyone does and no one really understands why. But there are actually culture makers, and I think we're in a season of rebuild of that culture remaking, rebranding. And I think that we have to, it's a time of new information, re-informing, and I think it looks really beautiful. And the new information that tamariki Māori, that the new reanga Māori are getting, is one of Māori excellence, is one that is empowering, of one that is like mana Māori, which is new and is excellent. I think to support that is a good thing. If anything in you wants to resist it, potentially question that, and where that resistance comes from would be important. In terms of things that I've seen, I'm not going to name them, but the most important thing for me, again, thinking of Matua Joe's response to one of the pātai last night about how sometimes when you ask Māori about their experience and things, if they're not prepared to ask the question, he used the word adolescent, the response can feel adolescent because it's quite, you know, it has like a bit of wonder behind it. But I think the most successful endeavours that I've seen into this space have been people who have a genuine heart to learn, and the posture is humility. And you know that whatever the response is, they will wear it. And that comes back again to the pātai of my friend that I referenced at the top. So yeah, all of the most probably formative experiences for me in this area have been watching people come in with full, genuine humility, ready to be taught by a space. And I think the space has always, to my view, benefited from that. Don't know if that answered the question.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Just for the list of requirements of doing well in the space, a positive bias. I call it, I'm terming, this is my term, positivism Māori, okay? But you have to look at Māori things and be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or, oh yeah, that's true. And not be like, I disagree. You can disagree after you've done positivist journey. That'll be my addition to your list. Otherwise you won't cut it. Pray for you.
Brad, do you agree with what... Well, let me put it this way. I'll frame it a little bit. There's been some kōrero around... Well, and I think also some fears and some genuine curiosity and some humility about people going, okay, this is cool. Now, how do we do this? How do we do this where actually Te Ao Māori is very different from my understanding of what it is to be a Christian and our spirituality and all of that. And so there's been a lot of people through the years who've just gone no to everything Māori. And so what Eugene is saying is they actually have a positive bias, positivism, what? Positivist Māori bias. Anyway, pro-Māori. And so when somebody says something, you're like, okay, yeah, cool. Curious, open. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think... how to answer? I'll tell you, at the moment, I've been working with churched Māori people for the past 6 years, and this is what God has said to them. Go back to the marae. So they all lived in the pubs. Then they all became Christians and went to a Pentecostal kind of churchy kind of world, where they did worship. Their knowledge of Scripture is up here. And then recently, like in the last 6 years, God said, okay, enough of that. That's not really who you are. But I need you to go back to your marae because your people need you. And so they did. They were already part of this marae. But they had an issue. Their issue, these are Māori people in the church. Their issue was, oh, we don't know how to be Māori and Christian in the community because it had been stripped out of all of them. You know, you couldn't speak Māori in a church because that's evil. And so they never practiced any type of Māori practice within the body of the church, in case they got criticised. So they did it at home. They do Māori stuff at home. Eating a boiler, sort of stuff. Just stuff we do. I don't know how to explain it. It's just things that we do that are normal to us, but everyone else doesn't really understand, you know. Like most Māoris, I'll say, we always look for a tohu. Māoris are just like that.
What's a tohu?
Some sign out there that confirms that what's happening is truth. Okay? Like miracles. We sit there and wait for it to happen. And then we go, yeah, okay, that's you, God. So we spent 5 years, a few of us, actually reteaching a whole church of Māori people their language, the theological knowledge of the spirit realm, the Māori knowledge of the spirit realm, their own tikanga of their tribal histories. And then I got them to share their own genealogies of their ancestors who all became Christians, and they're very big chiefs in the Māori historical world, and all their pain about that because their own people rejected their own ancestors because they became Christians and traitors. So to become a Māori Christian, you're a traitor, right? So how do you live with that? And so now, if you were to ask me what does a Māori church look like, is these guys. They live on their marae. They never left the marae. They live out the history of the marae. They do everything on the marae. They go hunting, fishing, you know, any big things. They serve the communities at their tangis, at their funerals, at their weddings. They continue the prayer. They have prayer weekends that their ancestors did for 100 years over the year, and it happens 3 times a year. So they've continued that, not in the old way, in a fresh way. And now they And so to me, they have become now the whole tribe, and this is a big tribal group. It's not in the north, but all of the tribes in their tribal group are saying, can you guys come and do all our prayer things? There's some ghosty stuff happening over there. Can you guys actually come and deal with that? Can you come and do the... So they now have a wider body of people that they serve that they could not do in a building of a church. And they're so much more fluent in their identity, in their language, in their cultural practice, but also in their Christian practice, because they have to live it out now, to the point that the Māori king now has said, you are the tribe that is my personal prayer team. Okay? Now that's a pretty high ranking. What church in New Zealand is that? But that came out of the churched people. They're people that are saved out of the pubs. They're working people. They're marae people, but they did not know whether they could even be a Māori in their community and a Christian, because it had been kicked out of them. Well, those days are gone now, and our people are going that way. So many of us have been called home. I mean, I lived in Auckland for years and years, and I just heard the Lord one day. I preached at church, and the Lord said, okay, that's your final talk here. Go home. And so in a week, we were gone. Went back home to Whakatane, and that was 3 years ago now, to serve your communities. And the knowledge that God has put in you, you need to use that to serve, not to hit them over the head. And so, I could talk all day, but I better just pass it back this way. But I'm just talking about practice. Our cultural practice and our Christian practice are the same in some ways. It's just we do things this way, but when you go to the marae, you got to do it their way. And one thing I've looked at is the way that Christian people run services for funerals, Māori funerals. We need to rethink our theology of the way you preach. Okay, because number one, you're using a language that none of our people know what you're talking about. This Christianese language. And then the theology that you preach is always, it comes across, all the Māoris on the marae are sinners and they don't know God.
Heathens.
Yeah, heathens. Exactly. You're all heathens. And our own Māori people that are preaching on the maraes at these things, they think like that because that's what they've been taught. And I'm like, can you guys just change your tack and change your theological thinking of how you speak to our people at a funeral? Heaps of Christians have come, it's way good that you've died and it's painful here, but now we know that you're in heaven. And that's the end of the conversation. And our people go, what is heaven? Can you please preach or come into the house and speak about what Scripture actually says is heaven? Where is it? What do you do in there? Who's actually there? What happens? Are we just all constantly doing worship, or are we working or getting rewards? Or even simple things like it says that there is no death in heaven. So that means every single thing is alive, from water molecules to trees. Okay? So if you start having that conversation on the marae, I've tried it on the marae. Man, they want to know stuff. The molecular structure of one plant in heaven will keep you, your mind ticking for the next 1,000 years. Okay, so why don't we just change our thinking when you go to preach, and everyone's a sinner. That's just the main thing that gets preached at the tangihangas, and we're bored of it. Okay, say something better. So if you really want to understand where the Māori church is going, that's where it's going. It's going to the marae. We're all being called back there. I'm not saying everyone is, because there's lots of expressions, Salvation Army's expression, a Baptist expression, but in general, most of us are being called home. And can I keep telling the story?
Go on then.
So I went, and when you go home, your people are going to get you to do stuff. Okay? So I started going to our marae meetings, and next minute, you're the chairman. So now I'm the chairman of the land which our marae sits on. And when you're the chairman, you got to do stuff. And I was happy to be nominated. Next minute, they just go, "Oh, Brad, you're in. But you're the chairman, right?" "Yeah, okay." So I'll tell you this story. This is the type of things that happen. The first day that I had to run a trustees meeting on our marae, it was a trespass meeting. So all these families had turned up at our marae and basically said, "This is our land, this is our marae, everyone else can get off, give us the keys, and we're blocking all the gates into the marae." And I was going, "What the heck? Who are these fellows?" Like this, and it was serious as, right? These are things that happen on maraes. And they blocked the gates. They had cars blocking all the gates of our marae, so that meant we had to shut our school down, shut our kohanga reo down. The marae was shut down. We couldn't have any... If there was a tangihanga on there would have been a war, because we couldn't bring the body there. Right? And then, because I was the chairman, my first meeting, "Welcome back home, Brad. Now you go down there and tell them who's boss." And I'm like, "What?" So my role was, and this is outside of my church thinking, right? All you people in churches, get in the real world, okay? This is part of the real world. The next real world is digging up dead bodies out of areas and shifting them, right? But, so I walked out there, confront these people, and "What do you think you're doing?" So "We own the marae." I said, "Why do you own the marae?" "Because we're shareholders." "Well, we're all shareholders too." And this went on for 6 weeks. And we kept it out of the news. Wasn't on the news. It was all over Facebook. No gangs turned up to support them. No one turned up to support them, actually. But they're actually our family. So you're in an issue now. They're our family. But, by the way, they're kind of on P and stuff, but they're just doing weird stuff, and the whole tribe could have just raised up and just go boom, and it would have been all on. And I'm praying, so I started praying around the whole area of the marae all the time. And I'm going, "God, why am I here? What's this about?" And this is what God says. He goes, "Well, your whole tribe is watching you. Walk down the street and confront those people. So they want to know if you're genuine enough for them to trust." "Oh, okay. Yeah." And I said, "What else?" And then he goes, "Well, I want you to open the gate so the King of Glory can come in, because your marae is dying at a faith level. And it's getting superseded by all sorts of things." "Oh, okay then." So we couldn't get the police to trespass because it's Māori lands. We had to go to the Māori land court. So these are all things you have to understand go on in Māori communities. And we finally got a court case with the Māori land court judge, which meant we had to be transparent with this family and tell them everything we're doing. And in the end, the court judge gave us a permanent trespass notice for the family, for that family and their associates, which basically means we could ban them from the marae forever, which we won't do because they're our family, right? But if we wanted to, we could. But it wasn't the trespass that removed them. The whole hapu came together, opened up the marae, cooked a big feed, told this family to come in. "Hey, what's your guys' beef? Come in and have a feed with us so we can hear what your beef is." Like this, they wouldn't come in. So the whole tribe said, "Well, shall we wait for the law? Nah, they're going to take so long. Let's do it ourselves. So we all went outside, got our trucks, backed in, chained up their vehicles, ripped them out on the road, unblocked everything. Once these people were out on the road, well, then we could ring the police, because it's not on Māori land. Police, can you come and take them away for a while, so that just for their own safety? Is that all right? Like this, and they did, and I'm going, God, man, what hoa. Well, listen, and God goes, well, now you know what a permanent trespass looks like in a natural, but now I want you to go up all of your mountains and permanently trespass the principalities and powers on your mountains that entrap your people. Okay, so all of these learning things are actually part of God's plan, because he wants to teach us stuff, right? And so the amount of people I've met who have gone home, they've been in churches for years, but they're at home now, and they're doing good work, serving their community. And when the time comes, the people will ask you, can you do the service? Or what do you reckon, Brad? There's so many things that have happened at home that from my Christian mindset, I'm going, nah, that ain't right. It's just stuff they do at home. And I don't have to deal with all of it. It's only the things that they ask that God brings up. So that, to me, that's where the Māori church is going. In the city's it's a different situation. But I would start training people to understand how Māori societies work at home and serve it. Go home to learn how to serve. Yes, the younger generation got a whole mindset of different sorts of questions that the church needs to learn how to answer. Because the church do not know how to answer Māori questions. They're just on a different page. And so you need to learn how to answer the questions what are not the same questions that Pākehā people will ask. Okay? And so we, in that kind of space, and need to be trained up that space to allow our people to go home to do stuff and to be known by their people and to be seen as genuine. It's good to have genealogy to a place, but if you don't live there and serve the people, it's only half the story. So anyway, that's a few stories.
Just a few. That's awesome. No, just picking up on something that you said there about, many of us in the church have been trained for so many years that the main conversation is actually about you are a sinner in need of a saviour. And, I work for a minister in the Salvation Army. That's the whole thing, right? So, but what is the gospel for Māori today? What is the gospel? What is the good news? What are the issues that actually God is interested in today that you're seeing him calling you into? Like Brad was talking about going into the marae and all of these things open up. Jordyn, what are you seeing as gospel?
I think that Jesus would join you in your pursuit for justice. That in practice. And so we, a few years ago, 2019, we found ourselves with ihu mātau, where a big occupation breaks out. And being Māori is political, like you just can't help it. Even if I really tried to. So we're there, and the tangata whenua there, the whānau there, are just asking for people to join them in their pursuit of justice, to join them in the story and to join them in the work of justice. And so we were just genuinely able to go, okay, that's what you need. Jesus would say yes to justice. Absolutely. So then we're going, sweet, what do you need? Oh, we need you to waiata, because protests will often, the atmosphere can become very hostile very quickly when you got 100 cops, armed cops, in your face, and you've got other people who they don't fit into 9-to-5 jobs, but they were the hands and feet of the occupation. So you have a lot of colourful personalities from different backgrounds and stories. And there was something about waiata that calmed the space so that we could maintain peaceful protest, maintain peaceful pursuit of justice, joining people in a story that started long before us and that carries on to this day. But to participate at the needs of the people and to bring them the songs. Well, we brought them the church songs that we sang every Sunday and got absolutely abused verbally. So we learned some lessons. We were like, these are not your songs. The songs that we sing on our Sunday morning are not the songs of the people on this whenua. So then we went back to their traditional songs, the songs that their own tupuna wrote. We went back to the protest anthems that had risen out of the pursuit for justice because there was joining, whakapapa, joining stories, overlapping truths and experiences. And they started calling us, oh, you guys are the church of the good vibes, because they couldn't really explain what they could feel, but there was a goodness to it, and there was a really beautiful, I think, the picture of it, that Jesus would turn up to join you in your pursuit for justice. And I think we've got lots, and it doesn't have to be a dramatic, as dramatic as an occupation, but there are many pursuits for justice. There are personal pursuits for justice. There are many communal whānau pursuits for justice that I think we don't get to see if we're in church on a Sunday. And that's it, just on a Sunday. You know, what would church look like? What does the gospel look like when we take it off the walls and we lived it every day, all day, every day? What does gospel look like in my everyday mahi? And how can I join, as a representative or as a whanaunga of Jesus? How do I join others in their pursuit for justice?
Because you'd have to know what the issues are for
exactly.
Them, right? So you'd have to know them.
Yeah, and then another one is Reo Māori. The reclamation of Te Reo Māori has absolutely turned my entire world around. The way that people talk about the way that they met Jesus and they completely transformed their life, that's how I feel about Te Reo Māori. 5 years of reclaiming my Reo Māori, my boys ko Reo Māori. I did not grow up with that. They see my husband who has a mataora, the moko kanohi on his face, and that is the epitome of handsome to them. I hated that when I was younger. I had so much internal hatred towards that. The reo and reclamation of our language has completely strengthened who we are in our identity and our tuakiritanga, and has strengthened our faith too. But I just think that there's so much opportunity for churches to join in the pursuit of the justice of our language, because language connected to identity, identity connected to worldview. So there's a whole opportunity here that's started long before we got here, that will carry on long after we leave, but to join into the pursuit of that justice, of the reclamation of our language, our identity, to join and partner. Like, imagine if you're running classes out of your church, all of that. Anyway, ideas.
To add on to that, I was also at the protests. I came sometimes, played a bit of guitar. And what I learned, the biggest lesson was that comfort is Jesus' enemy. Jesus is the Prince of Comfort, right? But he only brings comfort when you're uncomfortable. And so if you're sitting in comfort, Jesus has no space to land in your life. And so get uncomfortable. I have always been a youth worker, and I see the practice crew and mihi atu kia koutou and the Duckworths back. And I got called out of youth work to become an academic, which I thought was ridiculous. The longest essay I'd ever written was 500 words. And it was terrible, no referencing. What is that about? And when we were at the protest, the Holy Spirit landed on me and said, I need you to be an academic, now go to Carey. And I was like, oh, but I hate academics. And I hate academics because they trained our pastors that make our church spaces unsafe for Māori. And I just thought, what a waste of time. Why would I ever do that?
Can you just repeat that line? You hated academics.
Oh, I can't remember. It was just on the flow. You either caught it or you didn't. It's on the video.
I'm going to watch the replay.
Hey, don't break my flow. Where was I? Carey. I was at Carey. Didn't want to be an academic. And am on this academic journey, which typically I would have used like a comfortable journey. But every time I sit down and write, I remember Ihu Mātau. and everything that I write has to relate to our people on their whenua. And that experience there was injustice. So you could ask me to write an essay on like 1 Thessalonians or something, and I would always somehow make it about the protest experience. And how the Bible is never meant to be a text that allows us to sit in comfort, but actually always pushes us to justice. And so that's why even like I'm doing a PhD, but I have so many enemies, and I didn't choose them. They chose me. But here I am just trying to break down 2,000 years of tradition by just saying, hey, let us Māori look at Christianity through a Māori lens from the ground up, minus the tradition. Let's just start again and see what happens. And lots of people find that's like quite, violently alienating. And I've run like a few seminars on some of my mini thesis was talking about the kaupapa of here, which was looking at the relationship of Doctrine of Discovery and domination theologics, to the early missionaries in Aotearoa. And so I've done like 4 presentations on that, and every time I present, someone stands up and says, you better watch out with what you're researching. That's all lies and that's against the spirit. And I'm like, it might be, it's also an A+. So I don't know about what you think about research, but this is researched, so here you go. And I've never been able to find this. God has never put me in a space, or the God that I follow has never put me in a space where I've been able to be comfortable enough to be able to be like, yeah, I made it. I've always been in the space that's gone, oh, well, let's just make another enemy and just see if we can survive to next year. And now that I have kids, I have every intention of training them up to also be adversary number 1. Because Jesus is the enemy of comfort. So that's what I would say to that. In addition to we were all at the protest, even Anglican Kazi's. Waiora wishes she was there. She doesn't. But yeah, killed up.
Yeah, you've always made me feel uncomfortable, Eugene, I got to say. And,
Jesus, he's not Jesus, it's
help
Eugene.
me to call out to the Holy Spirit in those moments, and I do thank you so much.
The
what you
most
said there was around you didn't like academics because they're the ones who trained the people who run our churches that make our people feel unsafe. And that hit me like, oh, ouch, there he goes, making me feel uncomfortable and truth again. So really I want to ask Waiora around this idea of, because the academy, right? So people who turn up to listen to research and papers and all of these sorts of things, there's a lot happening in the space over these few days. But exactly what you said, but also it's the same space that has historically trained the places that lead our churches, that make our people feel unsafe. And what I have experienced myself, somebody came into my church earlier this year in Rotorua, and I was like, oh yes, who's this wahine Māori? Did she take a wrong turn? Not sure. But anyway, because I'd never met her before. It's not someone I met, and she just walked in. And then I talked to her, went and had coffee with her, and she said, you know what? I came in and I heard what you were saying, and I immediately felt, oh, it's safe to be Māori here. Now, some people might think, what? It's safe to be Māori anywhere, surely. Well, then maybe you don't know, maybe you're not Māori, or you haven't been in those places where it's felt unsafe. This was a very real response. So, Waiora, I guess, what are the things that help us in any space we are, whether it's church, the academy, wherever, to create that space that helps us to thrive?
Wow, wonderful. How do we thrive? Can I answer your previous question before answering your new question? Yes. About what good news might look like to Māori people today. It's kind of a non-answer, but I'm going to say what I'm going to say. In the same way that if you ask someone, what does joy look like to this group of people? What would peace feel like to this group of people? The answer, again, this is me. I would never deign to speak on behalf of all Māori, but this is my perspective as a Māori, is that the answer will be deeply subjective. Māori people, even the concept of iwi was one given to us in order to make the grouping of us easier for the other. Even one of my kraua never referred to us by our iwi. He would only ever go as far as hapu, but more it was whānau. And in order to know, you can't know what all Māori need, but you can do your best to spend the time, give the service, to understand the Māori that you are present to. And how you do that? Well, one way that you can do that, like the whakatauki that Te Karere shared last night, ko te kai o te rangatira, he kōrero, he kōrero, he kōrero, engari ko te kai o te ariki, he whakarongo, he whakarongo, he whakarongo. Go to, as Eugene has expressed, uncomfortable places, shush, whakarongo, and in time, you will see what te rongo pai looks like to those people. You'll see the gap, you'll see the need, you'll understand it. And in doing that, you give an example, I guess, of that. It's a little bit of a story, but it'll be fine. And a lot of you have already heard this story. And this is what it would look like if you came to us and you sat with us. And eventually I came to trust you and spoke to you about the experiences of our people and our whānau. One of the āhuatanga of Māori that is also expressed in the Bible, but I don't think it comes from the Bible, it's just a thing we do, is naming people on purpose, naming people to remember stories. This is only a short way back, but if we look at my whakapapa and we look on one side, my grandfather's name, he was named by my great-grandfather. His name is Taua. Taua in te reo Māori means war. So when his father looked at the future that this man would be living in, he saw for him war, battle. It's going to be a struggle. My koro lived in that. He existed in the reality of his name. His father knew what he was talking about. Māori people look with a long lens a long time. And then my grandfather comes to name my mama, and her name is Te Rauoriwa, the olive branch, taken from the Bible, because my kraua was once a ringatu minister, then became Presbyterian. I wouldn't say he thought better of it, but he did return to being a ringatu minister in his old age. And he named her full of hope for the future, Te Rauoriwa. That is the extension of that the dove returning with the olive branch. It's saying there's new lands, they've been washed clean, there's hope for the future. Same lands, cleansed for new purpose. And so that's what my kraua saw. That's what I think gave my mum some of what she needed to, as I say, be one of those people who chose Jesus when it was hard. Well, it is still in ways harder, let me say. And then Mama, obviously, 1989. Some of you are shocked to hear it. Came to name me. And so 34 years ago, Mama and Dad would have been involved too. They ended up naming me Waiora, from the story of the woman at the well in the Māori Bible. Waiora saying, if you drink of me, of the gospel, of the goodness, of the good news to us, you will never thirst again. And that was her hope for what I would do, for the world that I would live in. Hai papa, nui. But I know that I'm not the only one holding that up. I'm not the only one who has to lift it. And that might be the āhua, that might be something to inform the way that te rongo pai would look in my context, to my whānau, to my hapu. And there will be people, not with the same experiences, but who have stories, that have experiences that if you sit long enough and you listen long enough, you will hear what Jesus, what the good news will look like in their context. And if you, come with humility and let yourself be uncomfortable, you can do whatever you're called to do to answer that. I forgot the second question.
About...
Hei aha.
There we go. Hapai. I guess one final question in our last sort of 13 minutes, 12 minutes. For each one of you, maybe starting with you, Brad. One of the thoughts that I was just having over here was that maybe if you don't know what the issues are, not one particular person am I thinking of, maybe if you don't know what the issues are, but you say you want to be there and you want to be part of change and all that, but you don't know yet and you don't know the right people and you've been to the places or whatever, maybe there's, what is it that's holding you back? Like, what is it that's holding you back? What is the cost that you're unprepared to pay? What is that? What are you getting out of your current position that you're not willing to sacrifice? What is the payoff for staying before and not on the other side of that void? And on this side, what's the payoff that you get? Even though you know the injustice, the pain, the unfulfilled promises that sit on the other side of the void, what is it that you're unprepared to shift from? There must be something, right? And it might not be personal, it might be more collective. It's just how we do what we do. But I feel like when we've been called somewhere and we haven't moved enough to understand some of the experiences that have been shared here, there must be something either we're getting or a cost we're not prepared to pay in order to go there. So I'm just putting that out there. And but also I'm putting out this hope that if you have been stirred in your spirit to go there, that you're just waiting for the challenge / the encouragement / the next step. Not all the steps, just the next step to be able to make that journey for our sake. Our sake. I'm not talking about for the good of Māori, whatever that looks like. For your own good, for the future of Aotearoa and beyond, because, you know, it isn't just about what happens in this country. We have a massive impact globally too, in the spirit and in the natural. And so I guess my last question, Brad, is for those who are wanting to sincerely move forward in their spaces, what's your word of encouragement / challenge for them? And I'll leave that up to you to determine which particular point you would like to pick up.
In this space. Okay. At our little church, I go to a little church at Ohope Beach in Whakatane. It's right on the beach. It's a Pākehā church though, in the sense that, well, a lot of Pākehā people go there. And there's a big story. I go, why am I here, God? And anyway, it's a big story, but it's got to take some courage. And this whānau want to understand Māori things. They just got no avenue by which to do it. So it does take people, Māori people in some ways, who I think God is calling to go to these places and carry the people. And so they let me speak there once a month and tell all my freaky stories. And the church body kind of growing, you know, getting close to me. And but they have a heart for Māori. They just don't know what to do. So I said, well, okay, come with me. So we up at Ohope, there's a marae up on the hill, beautiful marae. It's a Presbyterian marae. I think it was the first Christian marae in New Zealand. A lot of us have been there. And so I took the whole church up to that marae and we spent a whole weekend there. Worship, doing haka, all sorts of things, and people could just share openly. I just find churches, you know what, you go to church for 10 years and you actually don't know anyone. Just sit in the marae and go, well, tell us your story. Man, I got to know people in that church, and actually everyone in that church got to know everyone else in a far better way. They actually never knew each other. They had to overcome their fears of being inside a carved meeting house with evil carvings, right? And, well, I just call it a library, okay? The marae is a library because it's got all the stories of the whole people of that area. It's not a place that worships carvings. It's a library. So we're going to the library, this is what I told my church, to hear some stories and read some books, okay? And they're going, oh, okay. And we had an awesome time there. And then I said, well, this marae is up the road from us. And what are we going to do about that? Because all of the families of this marae have moved away now. And there's actually no one to serve this whare. Okay, there might be 3 or 4 people. The whole meeting house, everyone in that church put their hand up, we'll serve this place. So we've got the calendar dates of that marae, and we just pack the kitchen, just work the place. We're not here to preach to people, we're just here to serve the marae and teach you how to put some mattresses out and put some pillowcases on and just simple things like that, and work in the kitchen. Because they want to do that kind of thing. People in the churches want to do that, they just don't know how. You know, so, but it does take people, Māori people in the church, to actually usher them. But it also takes the elders of the church to agree to want to do that. You know, so there's a safety thing on all sides. You know, and so, yep, we do matariki. I was the guy on that matariki video that went right around the whole country, and people were ringing me up going, "That's evil!" Like this, I'm going, you didn't listen to the whole video. What you did is watch the first 10 seconds, and then your racist bias kicked in, and you didn't even listen to the end, because everything you're telling me is exactly what I didn't say. Okay? So we do matariki there, but we have a certain way we do it that's not that honours God, right? That all the stars glorify the Father. So we do all that kind of stuff and have a big feed and think people become comfortable in it because it's something that we do, but it's not. It's for the God they know, not against the God they know. Okay, so I think you have to take a step into that world. And even if you go to worlds that you're so fearful of, but you have to overcome the fear. Nice. And I just told another story. I was invited to go to a Māori astronomy. 4 minutes. Hui. And I'm going, why are you asking me to go to that? Oh, we want to hear it. So this is all tohunga, Māori tohungas. They go, well, we want to hear about the Star of Bethlehem. And I'm like, what? So I went in there and said, God, if this is the right place, can you tell me that I'm meant to be in the right place? Well, Whirimako Black was there. She was asked to sing a song. So she sings a song to Jesus and then tells her testimony how she met Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, okay, now I'm straight on after her. So then because I was able to teach, I know all of the stars, the Māori stars. I was raised in that and brought up in that and all the constellations. And so I just clicked into the Hebrew constellations and where the Star of Bethlehem sits in the womb of the woman that has this speaker, which is actually was the very thing that was the star that was in the womb was on top of Jesus when he was born. That's what the Magi were searching for. And the constellation of Balulaubi, I think the woman. Okay, so. Man, everyone, all the tohungas were going, bro, that's actually what we want to hear, because that's the detail they want to know. So actually we're getting to detail. If you want to speak to our people, even in a scriptural thing, you got to know the detail of everything these fellas are talking here to be able to share and open conversation. Anyway, that's mine.
Kia ora, kia ora. Waiora. Hey, do you guys mind, are you opposed to going 5 minutes over? Like, are you okay? Because we don't have to eat till 6 or whatever. What time's dinner? 6:30. So you got plenty of time after that 5 minutes. Okay, Waiora.
We'll try on at the time, eh? We'll be honouring of people's time.
5 minutes, not 50 minutes.
It's going to be so quick, wonderful. 2 reflections. I'm going to make attempts to speak to either side of what we're calling the void these days. Thank you, Joe Williams, for justice. How dare I, justice, Joe Williams, for that framing. Yeah, in the same way that we've spoken about already, I think on one side is a willingness to become comfortable in the context of the other. Joe spoke about it last night and he said, I can do all of this in English comfortably. All of the Pākehā tikanga are being upheld, people feel safe, they understand what's going on. Until people are able to put themselves out there and become as comfortable in a tikanga Māori space, in a fully reo Māori space, then for me, that's not what the mutual flourishing looks like for me. So like imagine this room here, could many of you imagine yourselves how it might feel if the whole thing was conducted in te reo Māori how that would feel like, and if you were the one to be here doing this in my language with the heart to have me understand in my own language your ideas. So just, yeah, we're probably going to have to move through a lot of uncomfortable spaces in order for it to become comfortable. On the other side of the void again, to take from Wonderful Justice Joe's ideas, for Māori, Eugene and I were just laughing about your questions, everyone, about like what are you not willing to give up? And we're like, we've got to give up more? We're like, what you've taken's not already enough? But like Joe said last night, in order for us to live, and it feels, I can't remember the word that he said, it feels like paradoxical is the word that he said, that you have to give up, share what is valuable to you in order to stay alive. And it made me think of two things. The hardship of my sister and I sometimes feels like you're casting your pearls before swine. And it also made me, not to call non-Māori swine, it's in the Bible. And then also finally, the concept of trust shared by wonderful Dr. Brene Brown. She says that trust is making something that is precious to you vulnerable to someone else. And I want everyone to understand that Māori sharing te reo Māori with someone who doesn't have Māori whakapapa, Māori sharing tikanga with people who aren't of Māori whakapapa, Māori sharing anything of us in order to live is a journey of trust. And it might come in small increments initially, but it is that thing of making something that is of actually inexplicable value to you, vulnerable to someone else. You're going, are you going to hold that with the respect that it deserves? And you're asking that question, prepared for the answer to be no. And that can't be understated, I think. So, yeah, those are my reflections on either side.
Fantastic, awesome, Waiora, thank you. Eugene.
Mine are real short for everyone that isn't Māori. Copy my wife. You can look her up. She is the greatest embodiment of New Zealander, if you want to use that term. But she's Pākehā through and through, and she speaks Te Reo Māori fluently, she sings Te Reo Māori fluently, and she just embodies Māoritanga. And so, copy her. That's the easiest one.
Follow hope.
Be hope to the world. And for Māori, just tū ki runga ki tō reo. Learn the reo and then hoki atu ki te marae. Like, those are some strong things to do. And even if you don't get back to the marae to live, at least you'll be stronger in wherever you are serving. Jordyn, I don't know about Motua Brad, he seems like puking of the days, but some of us didn't grow up with Te Reo Māori, and that journey of learning Te Reo Māori has filled us to the brim so that we can overflow into these spaces. And so that tuakiri Māori will get filled up easily, learning the language. And that is all. Be hope. Hashtag be hope. Kia ora.
I think it's like a willingness to keep being saved. Like for non-Māori, like rather than enrolling and learning Te Reo Māori and doing all the right things to go, I'm going to save these people, I'm saving souls for Jesus. Actually, you're being saved. Hey, we're being saved. Te Reo Māori, in the same way that my language and reclamation keeps saving me, keeps pointing me towards Creator, keeps pointing me towards justice, let us orientate you, because this is contextual. We're in Aotearoa. You are called here for a reason. So be woven into the story. Be willing to be saved into our story that was here long before we got here and will remain here a long time after.
Eugene, did you want that back again, or are you okay? You're okay. You're about to finish that clap. Finish. Homai te paki. Hands up if you got some of what you came here for. Hands up if you're going to go and do something with what you came here for. Woohoo, praise the Lord. So let me finish just by saying, he mihi nui, he mihi aroha, he mihi maioha ki a koutou katoa ngā kai kōrero I tēnei ahi. He mihi hoki ki a koutou katoa e whakarongo ana ki a mātou. Thank you so much for your listening. for your deep listening, and thank you for being willing to be challenged. And if there was any little points in there where you're like, oh, you got uncomfortable, ask the Lord to come and be with you. That's what Eugene said. But also come and have kōrero. Let's share some kōrero. I guess my final thing this afternoon is, given that we've only got 1 minute, is to sing Kia tau, because Waitaha, hey, there's something in that. So can we just stand to just finish this session here? Unless there's a song that you have. No? Okay. So we are asking that in this journey that you are going to take even further as you go from here, that the grace of the Lord would be with you, because you need that. You're going to need that. It's not an easy one. That the love of God would be with you, because you're going to need that. And that the fellowship of the Holy Spirit would be with you. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai, o tō tātou ariki o ihu, karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te waipatapu, And my final comment, even in the practice of that tikanga of singing a waiata, some of you knew it and were ready to go. Some of you are yet to go learn it. So there's your first step. Go learn that waiata. Kia ora.